Hi, my name's Kania. They called me the poor girl at my own school's talent show, then told the crowd I wasn't even supposed to be on the list. My sister made a joke of my performance online. My mother said nothing, again. But that night, someone stood up. A stranger. And what he remembered about me changed everything. So let me ask you, what's worse, being forgotten by the world, or being quietly erased by the people who share your last name? Let me show you what silence can really do. I arrived early, not because I was eager, but because I didn't want to be seen walking in late, like an afterthought. The auditorium smelled like pine-scented cleaner and old wood. Warm lights buzzed overhead, yet I still felt like I'd stepped into somewhere I wasn't invited. Mom gave me a half wave from across the aisle, one of those gestures that said, "You made it," not, "I'm glad you're here." She didn't rise. She didn't smile. My sister Jolene, on the other hand, was glowing in the front row, surrounded by polished parents in shiny boots and oversized scarves. Their voices swirled around her like perfume. As I stood at the entrance, unsure of where to go, Jolene popped up and motioned me over. "Kenya!" she said, cheerful like a kindergarten teacher. "We saved you a seat." The seat was near the back, pressed against the wall beside the restroom sign and a mop bucket. The cushion was thin and slightly damp. I hesitated. Jolene leaned down beside me and whispered, "It's kind of last minute down here, but you don't mind, right? You've always been low maintenance." I nodded, because what else was I supposed to do? I slid into the chair. The metal legs squeaked. My dress brushed against the mop bucket's rim, and I caught a faint smell of bleach that settled right under my nose. I stared straight ahead, trying not to notice how everyone else was seated in clusters, smiling and leaning in to share whispers. I was a placeholder, an obligation with legs. Minutes passed. The show hadn't even started, and I already wanted to leave. But then Jolene's voice rang out again. She'd turned to the row behind us, speaking to two women in wool coats and name tags. "This is my sister, Kenia. She's performing tonight." The ladies smiled politely. Jolene continued, tone as sweet as oversteeped tea. "She's so brave. I mean, not many kids would go up there without private lessons or anything, right?" The women nodded, murmured something about courage. I felt my stomach twist. Jolene wasn't done. "We're all just really proud of her," I told Mom. "It doesn't matter how it sounds. It's about effort." I turned slowly toward her. She didn't meet my eyes. Just smiled at the women like she was selling something and they were holding their wallets. One of them patted my shoulder. "Good for you, honey. That's what matters." I wanted to ask her what she thought actually mattered, but I just smiled, barely. They didn't mean harm, but their kindness felt like the kind reserved for charity cases. When Jolene sat down again, she said softly, "Don't let the nerves get to you. Just play like you're in your room." Then, louder, "She writes her own songs, you know." I leaned back in my seat and let my head tilt toward the ceiling, trying to focus on the stage. The curtains hadn't even parted, but I already felt the audience's eyes labeling me. Brave, poor, different. I'd been here before, metaphorically. At birthdays where my name was last on the cake. At holidays where Jolene's gift bags had tags from Macy's, and mine said clearance in tiny font. At the dentist's office when Mom filled out her insurance info and whispered, "Only do the cleaning, not the extras." I learned young that silence was safer than saying, "This isn't fair." Because when I said it once, years ago, Mom sighed like I'd embarrassed her, and Jolene said I had a complex. From then on, I tucked the unfairness into my socks and walked on it. It didn't go away. It just made my steps quieter. Jolene took a photo with her friends, fluffing her hair just right. I sat still. I wasn't part of the picture, even though I was in the frame. From the pocket of my cardigan, I felt the folded edge of the music sheet I'd rewritten by hand. The original had a coffee stain from the diner. I'd copied it carefully last night while Mom dozed off on the couch. She didn't ask what I was writing. I touched the paper now, just the edge. enough to remind myself it was still there. Maybe that's what kept me sitting. Not courage, not obligation. Just the knowledge that even if no one asked, I'd come here carrying something real. I could have walked out. There was still time. The auditorium doors were open. The streetlights were on outside. No one would chase me. But the thing about being humiliated isn't that it crushes you immediately. It teaches you how to wait. But waiting doesn't mean surrendering. The auditorium lights flickered once, then settled. That was my cue to head backstage. I slid my music sheet back into my pocket and followed the hall toward the dressing area. The hallway narrowed, lined with student posters and leftover flyers from the science fair. I walked alone. Always alone, unless someone needed something. Inside the dressing room, the atmosphere hit me like hairspray. Girls were everywhere, adjusting glitter headbands, arguing over mascara, snapping selfies with fake peace signs. Laughter popped in waves, and the Bluetooth speaker on the windowsill blared a remix of something with too much bass. No one looked up when I came in. I dropped my duffel onto the far bench. It made a flat thump that nobody heard. I knelt, unzipped it, and reached for the navy blue dress I'd ironed last night and folded with care. Except it wasn't there. In its place was a thin plastic grocery bag holding what looked like fabric? I pulled it out, heart already tight. It was my dress, but not as I'd packed it. The bodice was soaked. Dark splotches had bloomed across the front like a bad watercolor. The smell was sharp, cleaner, maybe bleach. Someone had balled it up and left it for dead. I stared at it, my throat dry. A girl 2 benches down glanced at me, then leaned toward her friend and whispered, "Who did that?" I asked. Not loud, but not soft either. A redhead shrugged. "I think it got dropped or something. Might have landed in the janitor's bin." "Sorry." Jolene's voice floated from across the room. "Oh no, that's the dress you were gonna wear?" She walked over, feigning concern. "Well, maybe it's a sign to keep it simple, Ken. You know, focus on the music." Then she turned to the mirror and adjusted her earrings. I didn't respond. I just packed the ruined dress back into the bag, shoved it deep into my duffel, and pulled out my fallback. Black jeans and a wrinkled gray top with tiny holes near the seam. It didn't matter anymore. I changed in the corner, moving like I wasn't there. The laughter never dipped. After slipping on my sneakers, I stepped into the hallway, hoping the air would be different. It wasn't. A stagehand passed by, took one glance at the safety pin I used to cinch my top at the side, and handed me a fresh one without a word. I nodded in thanks. I didn't flinch when I reached for the mic stand at the prep area. I adjusted it exactly how I'd practiced. The stand clicked, the cord coiled. I checked the pedal. Everything was functional, even if I felt like I wasn't. As I leaned over to tighten the cable, a memory crawled up behind me. Last week, while the sign-up sheets were still fresh on the wall, I asked Jolene if she'd seen my letter of confirmation. She shrugged. "Maybe you didn't get in. Or maybe your Gmail's full again. Didn't you miss that email about picture day too?" I remember blinking, then nodding, thinking I was the one at fault. But the next afternoon, while taking out the trash, I found it. My envelope. It was half-torn, stuffed between empty juice boxes. Addressed to me. The seal ripped just enough to hide that it had been opened. I didn't confront her. Not because I was afraid. Because it felt like arguing with a wall that would smile while it blocked you. So, I said nothing. I signed the duplicate form quietly and reprinted my music sheet. Jolene had her spotlight. She always would. I'd learned that long ago. But she couldn't take the sound I carried. The one that didn't need lights, or fabric, or applause. I took a deep breath now and ran my fingers over the edge of the keys. Unplugged, silent, waiting for my turn. I didn't need confirmation to belong here. She could ruin a dress. She could lose an email. But she couldn't erase the chords in my hands. Behind me, I heard her laughter again. Perfect, polished, practiced. Someone complimented her lipstick. Someone else asked who did her hair. I didn't turn. I walked to the side of the stage and stood just off the curtain. I watched her reflection glide across the mirror. Not a strand of her hair was out of place. She caught my gaze in the reflection and smirked. But I didn't blink. I didn't return it. I just waited, not because I had to. Because I chose to. The dress was ruined, but not the song. I didn't need a clock to know when it was my turn. The air around me stiffened, and the hallway sounds narrowed into a tunnel. Claps fading, shoes tapping the linoleum, my own breath steady and shallow. I gripped the edge of the curtain like it might keep me upright. A voice from the stage boomed into the mic, cheerful but uncertain. Next up, we have, Kendra. Kendra Rollings? Some laughter scattered through the front row. A teacher coughed. A parent snorted. The MC tried again. I'm sorry, Kara? Kara Rollins? My stomach flipped, but my face didn't move. I stepped forward. It's Kenia, I said softly. No one corrected him. No one repeated it. I walked to the piano in silence, each step heavier than the last. The lights dimmed behind me, spotlight sharp on my shoulder blades. The audience settled, except for the ones still whispering. Jolene didn't say a word. She sat 2 rows from the front, arms crossed, smiling slightly, like someone who already knew the punchline to a joke no one else got yet. I sat down, adjusted the bench, just as I had 100 times in the garage with that cracked keyboard, and pressed my fingers to the keys. The first note came out soft. Too soft. I paused, then began again. This time, it rang clear. I moved through the melody slow and sure, the notes stretching out like threads I was weaving together to make a space that felt like mine. But the room didn't shift with me. No heads nodded, no phones lifted, no one leaned in. I finished with a quiet phrase, 3 notes that landed like breath on a mirror. And then, nothing. No clapping, no polite hum, just a chair creaking and someone coughing twice. Quick. My hands hovered for a second above the keys. My shoulders stayed still. I looked up. My mom's eyes met mine. She didn't smile. She didn't raise her hands. She folded them in her lap like she was waiting for church to be over. No tears, no pride. Just quiet. That kind of quiet tells you everything. It tells you not to ask. It tells you this moment was never meant for you. I stood, nodded, walked off stage without bowing. My hands were cold, my throat tight, but not a single tear made it out. I was done giving them the satisfaction. Backstage, the world was louder. Kids in costumes giggled. Someone dropped a prop. Jolene stood in front of a mirror with a girl from her dance team fixing her bun. As I passed, one of the stagehands touched my elbow gently. Hey, he murmured. Your name wasn't printed in the program. We were told you withdrew. I blinked. What? He looked apologetic. I double-checked the sheet before the show. Someone said you pulled out last minute. I didn't realize. It's fine, I said, but we both knew it wasn't. He handed me a copy of the show schedule, the MC's copy, the one with annotations. I glanced down. Slot 4. Withdrawn. I reached into my cardigan pocket, pulled out my folded copy of the original program. There it was. Kenia Rollins, original piano composition, threaded light. Exactly where it should have been. She'd told them I quit. Not out loud, of course. Jolene never made noise when she could make moves. She didn't scream. She orchestrated. I watched her reflection in the mirror. Still perfect, still untouched. She turned slightly, saw me holding the paper, and smiled like she was posing for a picture only she could see. I didn't smile back. Instead, I folded the page again, tucked it back in my pocket. Proof doesn't undo the erasure, but it keeps you sane. I kept the folded program in my pocket as the crowd shifted into intermission. The hallway filled with people heading to the vending machines, the restroom, or nowhere in particular. Just somewhere to stretch and gossip. I turned down the side corridor where the green room was and leaned against the wall. I wasn't hiding, not exactly. I just needed to breathe without being watched. I didn't expect the buzz in the hallway to turn into a notification on my phone. But it did. I opened the screen, and there it was, shared in the class group chat. A TikTok, my performance. Jolene had added a soundtrack, circus music, full of squeaky horns and a laugh track. The clip cut off right after my last note and froze on my face, mid-blink, lips slightly parted. The caption read, "She tried, factor courage, she's offbeat." It already had a dozen laughing reactions. Someone commented, "Is she okay?" Another said, "Brave, for real." Jolene's username was right there at the top. No shame, no hiding. If shame was a knife, this one had glitter on the handle and a slow twist. A couple of girls walked past me and looked down at their phones, then at me. Their mouths didn't move, but their eyes did all the talking. I slid the phone into my jacket, face down, and headed into a supply closet across the hall. It smelled like paper and acrylic paint. I locked the door behind me. No tears. Not yet. I sank down beside a stack of folding chairs and rested my head against the wall. It wasn't just the video. It wasn't just the caption. It was the fact that she wanted people to laugh. And no one had stopped her. No one ever did. Outside the door, the intermission announcements continued. I stayed in the dark. Quiet. Still. I didn't cry. Not because I was trying to be tough. I didn't cry because my mind was busy doing math, adding up moments, patterns, choices. Not mistakes. Choices. Jolene didn't slip. She aimed. When the knock came, I didn't answer. It wasn't for me anyway, just a janitor checking the rooms. After he left, I pulled out my phone again. My thumb hovered over the message icon. Instead, I opened my old inbox. A folder I rarely touched. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Just something that said I'd been right all along. And there it was. An email from nearly a year ago. Subject: Congratulations. Regional Student Honors, Winter Body. Dear Kenya, we are pleased to inform you that your composition, Beneath Blue, has been selected. My eyes scanned the screen, my stomach tight. I had never seen this. Below it sat another message, unopened, time-stamped the same day. From Jolene Fay. Subject: Do not send this. Body: You're going to embarrass yourself. I deleted it. You should be thanking me. It was all there. My name, my song, her decision. She didn't sabotage me in front of a crowd. She did it quietly, confidently, like someone convinced the spotlight belonged to her by birthright. I leaned back and stared at the wall. Paint chips curled at the edges of a faded mural. A tree without leaves. A sun with no face. The theft wasn't the dress, or the name, or the applause. It was the chance. To be seen. To be named out loud in a room that wasn't laughing. I stood, brushed off my jeans, and stepped back into the hall. I passed two teachers. One gave me a tight nod. The other said, "Hang in there," like I'd been chosen for sympathy. Jolene stood in the corner by the trophy case, talking with Mr. Saunders from the school board. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Hey, Ken," she called. "You okay? People can be so mean online." I didn't answer. I walked right past her and toward the lockers near the exit. My phone buzzed again. Another repost, another comment, but I didn't check. Instead, I opened a new note and began to type. Not to Jolene, not to anyone, just to myself. You've been erased before. Don't let it stick this time. I hit save, then closed the screen. The girl they laughed at online wasn't finished. She was just getting started. The house lights flickered twice, once to warn, once to reset. I stayed seated on the floor near the exit doors, arms wrapped around my knees, phone screen gone black in my lap. Intermission was ending, and the room beyond the auditorium doors started humming again. Programs rustled, heels tapped, kids were being corralled back into seats by the dozen. I didn't move. I wasn't hiding. I was just no longer sure I wanted to be seen. Someone passed me in the hall without looking twice. A volunteer parent, maybe. She was saying something about the next act being Jolene's group. Oh, she's so polished. It's unreal. Of course she was. I stood eventually, but not to return to my seat. I meant to slip out quietly, before the clapping started again, before anyone noticed I had nothing left to give. My backpack was half-zipped, music folder shoved inside, corners poking out like broken wings. But then a voice caught hold of the room. It wasn't loud. That's what made people turn. "Excuse me," he said. The man who stood had been in the last row all evening. I hadn't noticed him until now. Tall, gray hair, hands clasped behind his back, like someone used to being listened to only when he chose to speak. The MC paused mid-sentence, confused. "Yes, sir?" He stepped forward slowly, no rush in his gait. His voice stayed level. "Before the next group performs, may I ask, was that an original composition the young woman played earlier?" Silence fell like dust. Someone whispered. A program dropped. I stood still just outside the entrance, staring at the hinge of the door. My mom turned in her seat to look at him. Jolene blinked, as if something on stage had betrayed her. The room waited. The MC looked around, unsure if he should answer. The man repeated, a little softer this time. "Did she write that piece herself?" His eyes landed on me through the open auditorium door. They weren't questioning. They were verifying. I took a small step forward. My hands trembled only slightly. I said, "Yes." Not loudly, but I didn't shrink from the sound of it either. Somewhere, a student coughed. Another muttered, "I think she did," like it changed something now. He nodded once, slow, deliberate. "Thank you," he said, then turned toward the crowd. "That was music, not performance, not technical display. That was music." He pulled out his phone and, without theatrics, tapped a screen. "I believe I've seen her before," he continued. 3 years ago, outside a gas station in Pella, playing a beat-up keyboard with a sticky middle C. No sheet music, no showmanship, just playing something that made strangers stop and listen." He held up the screen. I saw the thumbnail of the video instantly. Me, 10 years old, hoodie up, fingers small and fast, over worn-out keys in a parking lot, while Mom was inside paying for gas. The room was still. He turned the phone to the judges. "She moved people then," he said, "and she moved me tonight." My chest felt tight, not from fear, but from recognition, the kind that settles instead of startles. I hadn't even known someone was watching that day. I thought I was playing into a void, just keeping my fingers moving, so I didn't think too much about the cold or the silence around us. But someone had seen it, and kept it, and remembered. He turned back to me. "If you're willing, would you play it again?" he asked. "This time, with accompaniment?" A wave passed through the room. Not noise, just the shift of weight, the rustle of attention changing hands. I didn't answer immediately. I didn't need to, because for the first time all night, no one was laughing. I stood, not because I had to, but because something in my legs wouldn't let me sit still anymore, the kind of stillness that had kept me invisible for too long. As I moved down the aisle toward the stage, the lights above dipped again. Arlo was already waiting by the side curtain. He didn't say anything, just nodded once. Calm, steady, like this wasn't a performance, but a conversation that deserved to continue. The piano sat where I left it, quiet and patient, as if it had been listening all along. I reached it without looking at anyone. Not Mom, not Jolene, not even the judges. My feet found their place. My hands hovered. And then it came. A voice from the front row, high-pitched and sharp with childhood honesty. "Didn't her sister say she only got picked 'cause they felt bad?" It was Daisy Quinn, first row regular, choir club favorite, and Jolene's tutoring kid last year. Her words hit the air like a dropped glass. You could hear how many people wanted to clean it up, but no one moved. The tension twisted in the seats behind me. A teacher cleared her throat, as if that would cover the sound. Jolene didn't say a word. She looked forward, stone-faced. I let my fingers press the first keys. I didn't need to correct Daisy. I didn't need to say, "That's not true," because the music would do it for me. Arlo took a seat beside me. He didn't take over. He didn't lead. He let me begin. I started slow, so slow I could hear the dust on the strings. The first few notes stretched like breath through a straw, uncertain but deliberate. I kept my eyes on the keys, not because I was afraid to look up, but because this was between me and the music now. And then, without cue, without pause, Arlo joined in. Not loud, not even strong, just enough. He layered chords beneath mine like scaffolding for a building I'd already built, but was afraid to step inside. And somehow, with him there, the roof didn't feel so far anymore. My left hand told the story of the house I grew up in. Quiet, cold, but standing. My right hand offered windows, cords that let the light in, even when the curtains stayed drawn. The song built itself. I didn't try to impress anyone. I didn't exaggerate the hard parts or skip the small ones. I played like the version of myself that existed when no one was looking, when I was just a girl on a porch step with a pencil and a keyboard missing its B. Somewhere mid-piece, I closed my eyes. Not for drama, for safety, because I didn't want to be pulled out of it by a cough or a look or Jolene's stillness. I stayed in that place until the last note fell like a feather into the center of the room. Silence followed, but this one was different. No giggles, no fidgeting, no fake coughs trying to distract, just still. Then a single clap. Not a teacher, not a parent. It was one of the younger students in the front. She didn't even look around first, she just clapped. Then another, and then the whole auditorium followed. It wasn't a standing ovation, it wasn't screaming, it wasn't chaos. It was cleaner than that, like the sound of a door unlocking. Quiet. Real. One judge stood, then two. I didn't bow, I didn't smile. I just turned slightly to acknowledge the room, because finally it had acknowledged me. I stood and stepped away from the piano. Arlo touched my shoulder, just once. It felt more like a thank you than a congratulations. As I walked off stage, I caught Mom's face. She wasn't clapping. She looked tired, or embarrassed, or both. Jolene wasn't clapping either. She was staring at me like I had stolen something from her, like the stage had been a rug pulled out from under her heels. But I didn't owe her anything, and I didn't take anything that didn't belong to me. Back behind the curtain, Arlo didn't say a word. He just nodded again. Quiet, consistent, the way people do when they've already decided you matter. I stood for a moment beside the curtain, listening as the MC scrambled to introduce the next act. His voice stumbled over the name. A juggler? A comedy sketch? It didn't matter. The room had already heard what it came for. I stayed a few beats longer, watching the lights shift on stage. But no one really looked at them. They were still looking for me. I didn't rush back to my seat. I stayed near the curtain just long enough to see the lights dim again, then slipped quietly into the side aisle. The audience was still buzzing, but softer now, like they didn't know how to return to regular volume after what they'd just heard. The next act was already on stage, but no one was watching. A boy in a tuxedo balanced spinning plates on sticks. One wobbled. No one clapped when he saved it. Then, Arlo stood again. This time, he didn't approach the mic. He simply turned to the auditorium and said, loud enough for the room to hear, but soft enough to make everyone lean in. I came tonight to find one student deserving of a full scholarship in composition and performance. And I've found her. He gestured toward me. The effect was immediate, a ripple, a collective intake of breath. A few heads swiveled toward Jolene. She froze, hands still folded neatly in her lap, but her jaw tightened. I saw it from the corner of my eye. Delpha Ray, the woman I still wasn't sure I could call Mom without flinching, kept her eyes fixed on the carpet. Arlo continued. It was not just talent. It was honesty, and courage, and clarity of voice. He nodded once, as if that was all he needed to say. A long second passed. Then the murmurs began. Teachers whispered. A judge leaned over to another. She wasn't even on the official program, he said, eyebrows raised. Arlo turned toward him. Which tells me more about the system than about the student. You could feel the tension shift. Not break, just shift. Some clapped. Others waited, uncertain, measuring how much they should care now that someone important did. Some people clap because they believe. Others clap because they're afraid not to. Jolene didn't clap, but Mrs. Aldridge did. She stood up halfway back in the room. Floral blouse, reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain, the kind of mom who always volunteers but never gets thanked. My son submitted a piece last month, she said, her voice shaking just enough to be heard. He was told he wasn't polished enough. No one responded. She kept going. But maybe it wasn't about polish. Maybe it was about who he's not related to. That landed. More murmurs. A judge shifted in their seat. One teacher started flipping through the program like it could explain itself. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Arlo turned to me again and held out a piece of paper. No ceremony, no fake smile. I walked toward him and took it. It was heavy stock, hand-signed at the bottom. The Maddox Foundation. A weekend mentorship, full ride, open-ended. I folded it once, neatly, and slipped it into the same pocket where my music had been all night. I turned back toward the audience. I didn't bow. I didn't smile. I didn't make eye contact with Jolene, even though I could feel her trying to pull mine. Instead, I walked down the side steps and slid into an empty chair in the far row. No one stopped me. No one leaned in to whisper. They'd heard enough. The MC stood awkwardly at the side of the stage, eyes darting between his clipboard and the crowd. He cleared his throat. Well, we'd like to thank everyone for their performances tonight. Our final act will be... He didn't finish. Jolene had stood up. Her hands shook slightly, her mouth opened. I think, she started, voice thin but reaching. I think there's something we should clear up. But the MC interrupted gently, firm like someone who'd had enough. We'll continue with the scheduled performances now. Let's respect the time. Jolene stayed standing, for too long, just long enough to feel the discomfort settle around her. Then she sat. Not everything ends with applause. Sometimes it ends with silence too loud to walk through. As the final act wrapped with a shaky rendition of a pop song, people began gathering in the lobby. Parents congratulated their kids with programmed pride. Teachers offered half smiles. The judges stood off to one side, talking in tight clusters. I could feel the shift in the air, not dramatic, just dense. Something had settled. I stayed near the side wall, folding my sheet music into my bag with a kind of ceremony. Not because I needed to protect it, but because it had protected me. That music was the only thing in the room that never lied. Jolene found her way backstage, brushing past a few students without a word. She had her voice back now. I think there's been a misunderstanding, she said to one of the event coordinators, her tone light, professional. This has all gone sideways. There's been some confusion, and I think we should clarify a few things before anyone... He didn't answer. No one did. People looked away, not rude, just uncomfortable. The kind of discomfort that meant they'd seen too much to unsee it now. I walked past her without acknowledging her. I didn't need to say anything. That silence she'd weaponized for years, it belonged to me now. Before I reached the main exit, a student aide caught up with the MC and handed him a sealed envelope. This just arrived. Ms. Farrow sent it over from the district. He frowned slightly and opened it, cleared his throat, then walked back to the mic still set up near the judging table. People quieted instinctively. He read, To whom it may concern, I taught both Kanaya Rollins and Jolene Fay during their middle school music courses. I had the rare experience of seeing their early development, not only as students, but as distinct voices. Jolene froze behind me. I watched one work hard to master technique. I watched the other, Kania, reach for something deeper, not for perfection, but for meaning. A hush fell across the room. There was an incident 3 years ago during a spring showcase. A melody was performed under Jolene's name that, in fact, had been written by Kenia. I had no proof then, just instinct. But I want it on record now. I remember. He paused. I remember who wrote the melody. I remember who changed it just enough to call it her own. I could feel the blood pulsing behind my ears, but my face didn't move. Then came the final line, steady and without flourish. You don't always need to win to be right. You just need one person to remember. The MC folded the letter. That was it. No follow-up, no debate. Just truth. Simple, balanced, and heavier than any award. I didn't wait for anyone to comment. I picked up my bag, slung it over one shoulder, and walked toward the double doors. Nobody stopped me. Jolene didn't call out. Delpha didn't rise. I wasn't angry. I wasn't smug. I was full. Full of all the words I'd swallowed, the songs I'd written in my head while pretending not to exist. That fullness carried me down the hallway, into the cool air of the lobby, and toward the corridor that led to the parking lot. Behind me, the lights dimmed. The room dispersed. Voices picked up again, quieter this time, uncertain. I made it halfway down the hallway before I heard footsteps behind me. Kenia? A voice called. I turned. Delpha stood there, arms crossed, hesitant. Not pleading, just hovering. Can we talk? She asked. I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't want to, but because I was weighing something heavier than her question. I turned slightly, enough to let her know I'd heard her. Now you want to listen? She opened her mouth, but I didn't give her space to explain. I just nodded once, calm, not cold. I'm not angry, I said. I'm just tired of whispering into closed doors. We didn't speak again that night. Delpha stayed in the hallway, her arms crossed like a barrier she didn't know how to lower. She didn't call out after me, just stood there, in that flickering stretch of silence, like she was waiting for me to hand her something she hadn't earned, a clean exit maybe, or forgiveness that came with a bow on top, a chance to still be the mother she had only just started trying to become. But trying doesn't erase the years you spent watching someone drown. So I left. Quietly. No tears, no shouting. Just me, my backpack, and the cold. It was the kind of cold that didn't bite. It settled in, slow and deep, the way certain truths do. I walked past the mailbox, past the porch where I used to sit after school, and out onto the street where my shadow stretched beside me, like it was relieved to be finally walking away too. 1 week passed before we spoke again. A Saturday afternoon. A gray sky, smudged like someone had dragged a wet brush across it. The kind of day that doesn't commit to rain, but holds the idea of it. Quiet and threatening, like a secret not ready to spill. We met at a small cafe near the park. It was nearly empty. Just the low hum of a dishwasher in the back, the hiss of steamed milk, and the occasional clink of a spoon in a ceramic cup. Delpha sat across from me, her posture careful, like even sitting down was a risk. She stirred her coffee slowly, staring into it like she expected it to speak first. They suspended Jolene from student council, she said, barely louder than the rustle of napkins between us. She's been removed from the award nomination list, too. I nodded. I already knew, kids talk. And when something crashes, especially someone like Jolene, the news spreads like wildfire on dry leaves. She says it's not fair, Delpha added, her voice catching slightly. Says people turned on her overnight. She wasn't exiled, I replied. She just stopped being the center of the room. The words sat between us, unblinking. Then she said, I didn't speak up. Not that night. Not before. I thought, if I chose a side, I'd lose the other. There was no excuse in her voice. No attempt to make herself smaller or more likable. Just the plain, hard truth. That was still a choice, I said gently. Even silence is a side. She didn't argue, and I didn't demand anything. No apology, no tidy explanations, no attempts to fix what had already been broken long before that night. We finished our drinks. I paid for mine. We stood, nodded goodbye, and left without hugging. No tears, no promises. Sometimes closure doesn't come with sweeping music or a well-lit goodbye. Sometimes it looks like two people walking away in opposite directions, both knowing something has ended. That evening, back at home, I checked the mailbox like I always did. Among the flyers and bills, one envelope stood out. Thick cream paper, blue ink, my name, handwritten. The return address read, Maddox Music Foundation. I opened it at the kitchen table, my hands steady but my breath tight. Inside was a formal acceptance letter. They wanted me in Chicago. A mentorship weekend. A scholarship that covered everything: tuition, travel, private lessons. A chance to grow, to create, to be among people who didn't just hear me, but listened. And at the bottom of the letter, in unmistakably careful handwriting, "See you soon, Kenya." A.M. I didn't cry. I didn't even smile. But I held that letter like it had a pulse, like it knew the weight it carried. Validation didn't fix everything. It didn't stitch shut every wound or erase the ache of having to fight so long to be believed. But it reached something inside me I thought had long gone numb. It whispered, "You were right." And that was enough for now. Monday came, and I walked into school through the front entrance. Not the side door, not the back gate, the front. No one followed me in. No cameras. No phone in my hand pretending I had somewhere else to be. Some kids looked up and nodded. Some looked away. But no one laughed. No one sneered. Jolene was in the hallway when I passed. She didn't lift her eyes. I didn't slow my steps. I didn't need to. In the auditorium, the stage was stripped, chairs stacked off to the side. The leftover banners sagged slightly, their tape giving up. Near the edge of the stage, a broken music stand leaned awkwardly. One leg bent, its top still standing upright. I didn't sit in the back. I didn't rush to the front. I just chose a seat. Mine. Not the one someone else gave me. Not the one that was left over. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was trying to prove I belonged. Because I knew I did. Not because of a trophy. Not because of a moment on stage. But because I kept going when it was easier to disappear. Because I stayed true when it cost me more than anyone knew. Because even when the applause stopped, I didn't. So no, I'm not asking to be seen anymore. I already am.